Welcome to another great episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. Today, we're diving deep into the crucial topic of how the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, or DFARS, and NIST SP 800-171, I didn't feel like reading out what that stood for, standards affect small businesses operating in the defense industry. From cybersecurity requirements to supply chain obligations, we'll explore the unique challenges and opportunities facing small businesses as they strive to meet these stringent compliance standards. Join us as we uncover key strategies, insights, and expert advice to help small businesses thrive in the complex landscape of defense contracting. These aren't the droids you're looking for. We're joined once again by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
Can you blame me for not wanting to read out what NIST SP 801 stands for?
I mean, hey, that's why we call it NIST, right?
So Mike, today we're taking a break from our compliance control minefield to talk about how these different compliance regulations can affect the small business. And we've talked about small businesses and SMEs on this podcast before in relation to compliance controls and specific instances, but we're taking a bit of a larger look at the small business on this episode. So with that being said, how do DFARS and NIST SP 800-171 compliance requirements impact the day-to-day operations of small businesses in the defense industry?
It's a great question. You know, I think that the big challenge with DFARS, NIST, and CMMC in small businesses is that it's forcing small businesses to act like big businesses. And I think that's the greatest way that I can truly summarize what's really happening. Because I think, you know, the DoD looks at this and says, this is what our requirement is to do business with us. And what the DoD expects is to be able to work with the maturity of larger businesses. And yet there are these mandates that smaller businesses be able to work in any form of government contracting. And in some branches of the government, again, Department of Justice, Department of Environmental Protection, et cetera, sometimes that work is not really quite as critical. They don't use the same kind of security standards. But at the DoD, everything they do is critical, all the way down the supply chain. And so it is absolutely a forced maturity moment when a company decides that whatever they do, they're going to try to do that for the DoD. Even if it's not particularly, a direct contract, maybe it's some subcontract work. And the problem is there's no real red flag about that, right? There's not really some big blinking, flashing sign saying, hey, you're entering another type of work. It just looks like work until you read the requirements for being eligible to do that work. And so what's happening is all these small businesses take on defense work, and some of them know what they're getting themselves into, some of them don't. But for the ones that don't, they look at these requirements and it's like all other, legal techno mumbo jumbo type stuff that they read, and they kind of gloss over it. And then eventually, something happens and they perk up and they go, whoa, wait a minute, this is a big deal. And, from that perspective, I think that it's a mixed bag. You get two things going on here. Number one, you got to think and act like a big business. You're looking at real risk management requirements. You're looking at real cybersecurity and information security requirements. You can't get around it. You got to do it. It's mandated by law, and you just got to walk the walk of a little bit larger company, especially if you're a really small company. It's just no way around it. That's good, in my opinion. And I'll tell you, I'm consider myself somewhat of a small business owner. I guess we're probably more of a mid-market business now, but I'll tell you that when it comes to maturity, the more maturing steps in business a business can go through, believe it or not, one way or another, the faster it will grow. And that's an interesting conundrum. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. What comes first, the size of the business or the business acting like a bigger size? And so I think from that perspective, it's really a great thing to have small businesses getting involved in defense work and becoming compliant, because it will help them be a better business. It's really that simple. It will help them to not get hit by ransomware. It will help them to not be as vulnerable to attack. It will help them in so many ways. I think that's good. Now, here's the bad part. The bad part is the cost, okay? The cost is tough. It's just simply not free. Like a lot of things that you can approach in business that are free or $100 a month, it's not gonna be $100 a month to get compliant. It's gonna cost some money. And for a small business who is totally used to surviving on being cheap, okay? Sorry, that's just, to put it really bluntly, that's how most small businesses operate, is they are way more concerned about the expenses going out than they are the revenue coming in. It's a small business mindset. And the second that a small business reverts that mindset of, instead of watching the expenses go out, they become much more worried about getting more and more money to come in, they will stop being so small. And that is, I just really, from an investor perspective, right? So I do a lot of investing outside of on-call. We have holding companies and things like that that I deal with. And from a small business owner perspective, from a mid-market business owner perspective, I can just tell you that is one of the absolute linchpins to growth. And yet small businesses really, really struggle because all they know is bootstrapping to get that thing off the ground. And what it takes to run a good, solid, growing defense company is not what it takes to run a small business. It's just two different things. It's two different mindsets. So I think that the cost is a problem. You're forced to acting a certain way and you got to pay the bill on acting a certain way. And I think for a lot of small businesses, that's very, very tough. It affects them operationally. We actually have some very unique programs in on-call. One of them is called a micro program, and it's a purpose-built program we created specifically for micro-sized businesses with 5 employees or less. It makes getting employees, getting their companies compliant, even if they have only a couple of employees, only if they're, even if they're solo. This program is under $10,000. It's the cheapest program that exists in the history of the world when it comes to getting compliant with something this complex. It's really, I'm not gonna tell you we make a bunch of money off of it, but we call it a good service to the defense industrial base that we provide it. And I think, again, it's a really great training ground for us. It's a good thing to do, and it helps a lot of businesses. And again, there are a slew of small businesses in the defense market. So I think from that perspective, you know what? Dealing with higher levels of cost is part of growing a small business. Look, I have a growth mindset. Look, we're here to build companies as large as there is demand. And that's always been my mindset. It'll always be my mindset. I think that kind of stuff is possible. So from that perspective, I think, it just makes sense to carry through that idea that when you get a bigger expense, the problem is not the expense. The problem is you not having enough money coming in, and you got to go fix that. Because let me tell you, if you got enough money coming in, any problem is solvable. I'm living proof of that. We can solve any problem by throwing money at it, and I think if you look at how our US government works, it's the same situation, right? When they've got a problem, they go get a budget bill passed and they create money, and then they go solve the problem. That's why we're the first people in space. So what does all this mean? If you're a small business and you're looking at getting compliant, there's 2 things that I will tell you. Number one is, and boy, I just had a phone call like this yesterday, a very closed mindset kind of phone call. I said, hey, we need to rewire your brain to ask for the expenses involved in compliance as a part of all of your next contract proposals. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do it. You either got to raise your price, or you've got to ask them if there is an option for a line item reimbursable expense for compliance. Right? The only reason you're doing this compliance stuff is for them. They ought to pay for it. And the response I get back, and it's like 50-50, right? 50% of people will say, we could never do that. They don't even give it any kind of time or consideration. They just immediately go, I want to get compliant for the cheapest amount of money possible. I have to do it. There's no way we could possibly raise our price to the government. Or no, I could not raise my price to the prime. And I think to myself, wow, that's a terrible mindset. You gotta raise your price by like 17% a year just to keep up with inflation. How are you going to survive? The reality is they probably won't, or at least they won't in their existing form. The other half of people that we talk to, we show them our program, we put them through the consultation, we introduce them to these ideas, and if they're open-minded, The reality is we give them something like 14, 15, 18 strategies on how they can charge more money for the same thing, how they can build a brand within the government, how they can, go after all this free money that's out there. I mean, SBIR, STTR, like you name it, it's there, it's free. You just got to go get it. It's a little bit of work. And then how to talk about the idea of line item cost reimbursements, how to talk about contract reimbursement for costs incurred due to the fact that you're working with the government. Nobody else has these expenses. We talk about the idea of just plain raising your price. We talk about the idea of additional invoice discussions with your procurement people. So many different ways you can do this. And those other 50% of companies that, take us up on that offer and have an open conversation with their contracts people, that includes at primes, includes other private companies. Somebody's flown it down to you. I think that it is a great maturing point. That's really, what is the operational impact? The operational impact is there is a certain degree of corporate maturity that comes about when you take this on, when you make that commitment that you're going to be compliant and do work for the DoD, whether it's as a prime, sub, whatever. That's a huge impact. It's a huge impact at every business.
Gotta tell you, Mike, I think we have a podcast first here, because without knowing it, I think you answered all three questions in one answer. But we'll hit them anyway. Feel free to wax poetic or give examples. And because we're gonna ask them anyway, because, well, they're here. So with that being said, and you kind of, as I said, you already kind of answered this, but feel free to add more. Well, what are the main challenges that small business face when trying to meet DFARS and NIST standards?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I probably covered it. I think that there's probably, so we talked about the price point, we talked about the maturity point. But the other part of it is they've got to find one way or another some more than basic IT expertise. And again, it's all about this mindset. It's so fascinating to me, because you look at the difference between a big business and a small business. And the big business is no different than the small business, except there's a whole lot more people picking up the phone that want to spend money with them than the small business. Everything else gets fixed very easily as long as money is flowing in the door. And this is no different. And it's why we advocate that as a part of compliance, you accept and understand that compliance is going to cost money. It costs money to play in this space. There's permission to play. But if you'll take on that challenge, it's where the big money is anyway, right? US DoD spends more money than any other single entity in the world, period, by a large multiple. There's nothing else that spends money like the US DoD. You want to talk about that couple $1 billion city they're building out in the Middle East? Take one look at one of our missile programs, right? Take a look at the budget on the Tomahawk missile program, billions, right? So, I think the biggest challenge is, one, mindset. Again, you're going to have to hire outside experts. I wouldn't try to do this yourself. Even if you're small, even if you're a one-person business, if you've got actual defense dollars coming in, right? Take some of that money, reinvest it into future work, get a real expert, get yourself mature, and get yourself to a point where you're not going to get hacked and attacked, right? Get the security part working, get a good partner in that. On-call is one of those partners that is particularly price friendly when it comes to the smaller businesses. And partner with them, learn from them. If they can only teach you cybersecurity stuff, I think that's valuable. But if they know government contracting like we do, I think that's exceptional, right? That's what I think. That's another thing that's kind of lost, Roman, is it's like a lost art. And maybe it's a COVID thing. Maybe like post-COVID, a lot of people are doing this work from home stuff, and people just don't interact with other companies like they used to. But I feel like there's been a lot lost over the last few years in terms of networking. I think there's a lot lost in the concept of, when you have a vendor and they provide you with a service, that's a great relationship. When you have a vendor and you can learn from them because they're mature in their space, and particularly if that space happens to be something like government contracting, where you can really gain financial benefit from someone else's knowledge who's been in that space for a long time and knows how to play the game. Oh my goodness, man, that's like, let's get married, right? That's a relationship. And I have to tell you that, we do that with some of our vendors. I'll give you a great example. We have a vendor called Synex. We do a lot of Microsoft licensing through Synex. Synex is a tremendous partner. They're tied directly in with Microsoft. We can get, extremely advanced experts right on the phone with our experts. We can solve any problem with them. We can get marketing materials from them. They help us to sell more product. It's an incredible relationship. It's a true win-win relationship where they win because we funnel a lot of money through them. But we win because we get an army of experts, right, that'll help us to move that money, to help us to do those sales. So I think, again, with small businesses, they're so afraid of how much money that they're spending that they don't look at the potential of what that investment, right, where their dollars go, what it will bring them. If I'm a small 1 or 2 or 3 person business and I want to not be a 3-person business for the rest of my life, I'm looking at my vendors, the people I spend money with, and going, how can I extract more out of you? Right? That's one way to do it. It just may not kind of be like the obvious thing. Like I might buy something from you, but then not go, hey, let's have like a real conversation, get to know each other and see how else you can help me because I want to grow. My growth would mean I spend more money with you. That's the case with almost all vendors. And how can I make this into something much better? So partnering. I think that's one of the biggest things that a small business is just going to have to do. And they're going to have to put their ego and take home aside. If you're a small business, the fastest way to stay a small business is take money out of your company, right? When you take home some massive amount of profit, your business is only doing $1 million a year. It's not going to do 3 million the next year. It's not, right? Because you didn't feed it. And, meanwhile, take a modest salary out for a couple of years, quadruple the size of the company, and then you start taking money out, right? When you're at like 5 or 10 million and you can really actually take something worthwhile out. The level of profit, again, going off on a tangent here, but the level of profit of a $5 million business, okay, a $5 million small defense contractor, level of profit you can pull out of there might be $1 million, okay? If you're like doing $1 million, right, and you can only take home that same 20%, let's call it $200,000 that you're taking out net, all right, it'll take you 5 years to get that level of profit out of that business. 5 long, hard years of drama and running the business and all that stuff. But if you can just accelerate and spend year 1 through 3 building it to 5 million, and then in year 4 and 5, you do 5 million and like, I don't know, 7 million, right? Your gross is going to go from 800,000 to 1 million to between 2 million and 2.5 million. That's a huge difference. That's 150% potential increase by just investing in the business and growing it. And I say all of this because that's where compliance really comes in. That's where I think there are so many small businesses. And again, we just had a great phone call with them, with a client yesterday. And their biggest thing was like, how can I reduce how much this costs? I went through a couple of things. I said, well, we can do it virtually. We'll save $7,500 and not fly our people out there and, do a whole on-site visit and all this other kind of stuff. But I said to him, look, I don't think you're going to get as much out of this. I don't think you're going to get anywhere near as much. There's not going to be that, going to lunch talk where we're spilling secrets. There's not going to be that, the after hours, right? Because dude, when our guys go on site, I mean, it's 10, 12-hour days. We're hustling, we're busting butt for everybody. We're killing it. Like we're 100% focused on that client in that city. And you're only getting our senior people. You're not getting low-level guys. Not that we have people like just to even work with us, you've got to be a pretty stout tech. But nonetheless, you get what you pay for. And I get it, especially when you bootstrap to get the business off the ground, you don't sort of see that. But if you, again, to answer that question, that's where I think small businesses really need to make the changes. They need to realize that this is probably bigger than they can handle. They've got a partner. They just have to. They've got a partner. And they've got to get to a point where they understand that there is more value than meets the eye to doing this. As a matter of fact, actually, I'll tell you, we originally got compliant with this with 0 mandate on us. We did not do defense work. We got with this because we saw that it would help us mature from a risk management perspective and from a cybersecurity perspective. And we wanted a definitive way to get both of those done. And that's what it delivered. That to our business has been worth millions. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully somewhere in there I got to the answer you were looking for, but I really do think that's the greatest challenge. The greatest challenge is the mindset of the leadership of any business.
No, you got there. And the funny thing is that while you were getting there, I had to pivot at the last minute because the original third question was specifically about cost. And considering that you touched on cost in both of these first two questions, I'm not going to ask it to you again. So I had to go to my alternate questions and pick out a good one. And I think this is a pretty good one, although I may be serving you up a softball right down the middle here. So feel free to hit this one out of the park. What or first, I do want to say that one of the alternate questions I have was what challenges do small business faces if, or what consequences if you're not compliant? The easy question is, if you're a small business and you're not compliant, and you're trying to get defense work, that could be the ultimate consequence. That could be the end of your business because of the costs that are involved in non-compliance. But that's not the question we're talking about. The question where I'm going to ask is, what resources and support are available to small businesses to help them achieve and maintain compliance with DFARS and NIST SP 800-171?
Where I tell you what, Roman, number one resource is call on call. We offer a free phone call
There's the
with one of
softball.
yeah, right. Like there's the softball, man. Call us, right? We'll literally put you on the phone with a certified compliance expert for free who can talk to you just like I talk to you guys on this podcast, who can work through the specific issues you've got going on and won't charge you a penny. Now, we're going to provide you with some education. We're going to fill in the blanks. We're going to get rid of all that dirty misinformation that a lot of other vendors put out there. I'll give you a great example of that misinformation. I was on a call yesterday. Vendor says to the client, it's going to take us 8 months to get you compliant. Help me understand how on-call is going to do it in 3 days. And I smiled. I said, thank you, client, for the softball. Be happy to explain that. Did you know that it only takes 3 days to train a CMMC certified assessor? The problem with the question is, I don't know what would take 8 months to get you compliant. We do it in 3 days. And not only do we do it in 3 days, but we do it and we back it with a money back guarantee. And I won't kid you, it's a fairly intensive 3 days, but I don't know, which would you rather, 3 days or 8 months? You get what you pay for. And at the end of the day, here's what's more important. They're not actually getting you compliant. They're going to provide you with a couple of different solutions that are compliant. And the second that your government client or your prime or whatever has a request that falls outside of the parameter of what you can use their tool for, well, yeah, you just got locked into a 3-year agreement paying for their stuff, and you can't actually use the compliant solution to do what you need to do. And you as a company really aren't compliant. You're just using a compliant solution. It's a mess. It's a mess what a lot of people are selling out there, and they're not really giving full consideration. The problem that you have is that you're not compliant. The problem is not that you need another IT tool. And so, one, I would say call us. Okay. We are completely focused on getting you compliant and don't care what tools you use. Certainly, we have a tool set if you need one, and we have recommendations. But the most important thing is the call doesn't cost anything, And again, this goes right back to my whole diatribe earlier, which is small businesses need to reach out for help. This is not something that they're going to get on their own very easily. It's why we started, really pivoting and focusing on this, because we saw this isn't just something some people have a problem with. This is something like everybody struggles with. So that's the first place. Second thing is, there are numerous resources out there that the government puts out there. And here's what I will tell anyone listening to this podcast. I've been through this, or I've been through the whole government contracting, defense contracting thing. Time versus money. There are amazing resources out there. SCORE is one of my favorites. SCORE will pair you with a free, very advanced business mentor who is volunteering their time to come and help small businesses to get to their next level. But the challenge with SCORE is that SCORE is going to make you go do things to get help. They're going to make you go build a business plan. They're going to make you go do financial projections, and then they'll talk to you. Why? Because that stuff makes you think through your business, and usually your questions get answered when you do that. Let me tell you something. I haven't had a formal business plan for one of my businesses in like 2 decades. And the reality is, I don't think you need a business plan, right? That's old school. I think if you've never had a business before, you should make a business plan. If you've ever been successful in business, the reality is you didn't follow a plan. A plan is what happens when you get in a boxing ring against Mike Tyson and he throws the first punch. It just goes right out the window and you're just trying to save your life. All right. Um, I mean, it's just, I don't know what better way to really kind of put it. It's just business plans are great and it's a great way to communicate to someone else what's going on, but it's not going to solve the problem. It's just not, but they'll make you do it. So SCORE, PTAC, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, there's all kinds of free government resources. The consequence for them being free is they're going to suck the life out of you and leave you with no time. I spent years trying to go through those programs, figuring out how to win government contracts. And I'm not going to tell you that they didn't work. I'm just going to tell you that I spent an inordinate amount of time not making money before I could get to the one golden nugget of knowledge that they dropped on me. And more often than not, these are people who are really just honestly time wasters, but they exist. They're resources you should know about. Now, another resource that you should go to is your current client base. Someone in your current client base, if you're listening to this podcast or even on this topic, they probably have successfully won government contracts before, particularly defense. If it was me, I would pick up the phone, I would call them, I'd find out who their contracting officers are, procurement people, whatever. And I'd say, do you mind having a phone call with me? I would love to pick your brain. Do you know how many times I've rejected a phone call about someone saying, I would just love to pick your brain? Zero. I've never rejected a single person that asked me that. All right. As a matter of fact, it's one of, as a person who's been there and done that, I mean, I think there's no better value I could bring the world than to share my advice with them. And I think that's for sure something that we do here on this podcast. I'm not getting paid to do this. I mean, we do it because I know there's a lot of people out there struggling with this. And you know what? 1% of those people are going to come out and they're going to be clients. 99% of those people, they've got more time than they have money. And they're going to sit there and absorb the content and they're going to at least get a little bit closer. They're going to get more secure. They're going to accomplish some good in their business. Maybe 0.001% of people will literally go out and watch the 1,000+ videos I have up on YouTube and actually fully get compliant on their own. It's possible. I think you probably still struggle getting a lot of the written documentation and policies in place, but you know what? At least to figure it out, it's probably most of the content is there. But the reality is, when it comes to the time versus money equation, how long do you want to wait to get your business going? How long do you want to bang your head against the wall trying to get compliant? And I think the resources, I don't know. I don't think there's a better company to go to or a better resource out there than what we put out there. And the best part is it's proven because you can go look at all of our content and know that we know what we're talking about, probably more than, more credibility than most vendors have. So yeah, a great question. There's a lot of those government resources out there. And I have to tell you, my personal experience with them is they do have good stuff. You better know what you're looking for, like precisely. You go in there with a generic question, you're going to get like a, I don't know, 6-month waste of time answer. It's going to take you that long to stop wasting time with them because they're not delivering value. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary list. I think from there, usually people have specific needs. And if you have specific needs, I'd say just call us, even if we don't have anything to sell you, we'll at least point you in the right direction. It's what we do.
And that's some great information, but now it's time for everybody's favorite part of the podcast where we get a little bit silly because this stuff can be a little bit dry and a lot to take in. And, we get calls all the time of people that say, oh, I've watched all your videos on compliance. And we're like, yeesh. Kind of thing. So we like to have a little bit of fun where we can. So for this one, I'm brought back to one of the previous questions we didn't use, where if there's a business out there that's like, oh, I don't want to get involved in all this compliance stuff. Can I just not do that? It's like, okay, well, I offer this alternative. Can I just protect my sensitive information by hiding it under a giant pile of rubber ducks?
Well, technically you can.
Like what if you just had a room and
Technically you can. I mean, as long as your pile of rubber ducks is within a secure facility, hey, why not?
put a padlock on the designate a specific office in your building and put a padlock on the door and fill that room full of rubber ducks. That could work.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you know, just because there's a funny situation going on, like a pile of rubber ducks. Look, at the end of the day, physical security is always preferred to things like encryption that can be easily hacked. So if it takes a pile of rubber ducks to hide your CUI so that visitors don't see it when they're walking by, it's an absolutely legitimate way to handle it.
You know, I think if the government decides to audit your rubber ducks, that might not go so well because they'd be like, hey, you know, that's not what it says in the NIST or the DFARS guidelines. But as far as just straight up decent, I mean, ducks are as good as anything, I guess.
Well, you know, the ducks may not be particularly what is hiding or protecting the CUI. It might be hiding it, but as long as the rubber ducks are, within a protected, secure facility, I think we'll be good to go.
There you go. And that and that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us and giving us great information on the importance of compliance with NIST and DFARS for small businesses. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
The
Thanks for having me.
conversation, but the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If they haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they gotta like it, right? And they gotta subscribe to it. That way they can see the latest versions coming out.
There you go. And we'd really appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.